Hey everyone, just waiting for the last people to get in. Okay, I'm just gonna. How do you enjoy the code talks so far? So, okay, who doesn't like the code talks? Keep your hands down, and everybody who likes the code talks so far, raise their hand. Good. No hands down. That's good. Okay, we start then. So, what I want to talk to you about today is how we settled a unicorn, or put differently, when scalability becomes more than a buzzword. And first, I want to give you a short introduction of About You. Who heard of About You before? Hands up. Okay, few people. About You is a tech company, or at least that's how we see us. We are a tech company that also happens to do e-commerce or fashion. We started off in May 2014, or we had our initial go live there. And we're currently around 650 people, and out of those 650, there's 200 developers or tech people. And just last year, we became a unicorn, where my title comes from. Short intro to myself. I used to be a software engineer, and at heart, I'm still at About You since 2016. And I also did my bachelor thesis there on an internal project. And since mid of 2018, someone in the company, our CTO, found that I had a talent for speaking in front of a lot of people, and said, hey, why don't you want to do that? And let's try that out. And we did. And now I'm doing this, and also organizing the code talks, and doing some other stuff internally. But this is at the moment my focus. And I'm also doing my Master of Science in Practical Programming with a focus on machine learning at the moment. And also, really important, I'm a Vue.js and Firebase enthusiast, and I'm currently addicted to Apex Legends. Yeah. So usually, I really like talking about code, but today I want to talk about something different to you. And that brings me to why I want to do this talk. So in my new position in the company, I happen to talk to a lot of people that are outside of About You and don't know a lot about the company, except for that we are doing e-commerce. And especially the tech people always ask me a lot about our internal structure and how we organize, and that brings me to a concept that we call Move. Also, a lot of times I get asked about our AWS migration, so I wanted to put all that in there as well. I got asked about a tech stack and how working at About You is, because apparently that somehow, especially at the Otto Group, is still a mystery to a lot of people. And they are always like, if you say, oh, how long are you working there? And then I'm like 3 years, and they're like, oh, wow, that sounds hard. But actually from the inside, it's, I don't know, it's, you learn a lot. So that brings me to this talk. So what I want to talk about today is how we settled our unicorn, and I think that's mostly based on 3 points. So first of all, our startup spirit that I believe we have been able to continue until today, even though we are now 5 years into the business. Then I want to talk about Move. Like I said, our internal structure to organize our teams, and then also our architecture and infrastructure, which is Zoa-based. Who knows what Zoa means? Okay, a few. So Zoa means service-oriented architecture. So that's, for example, like microservices fall into that category of architecture, and there's a lot of others. And I want to talk about that, and also, as I said, about the AWS. So our journey of the unicorn will take us from our go live to 2 events that are called Crazy Christmas internally, and actually the marketing campaign was also called that. And then we will get us to the AWS migration, and in the end take a short resume of where we are today in our company and how we scaled on that way to this point. So starting off as a company, actually before the go live, our CTO and I think like 20 techies back then, sat down and thought about how should we go on building our infrastructure and our architecture internally and just the entire application. So they said, okay, we don't want to use a Magento or some other provider or framework to do this. We want to build everything from the ground up by ourselves, because that way we can scale better, building on a service-oriented architecture, which mostly communicate via APIs. And back then, we were hosting our infrastructure at a German hosting provider, which I will get back to later. And then there's also the startup spirit that I want to talk about. So who here worked at a startup before? That's fewer than I thought. We are in Berlin, come on. So for those who haven't worked in a startup, and I think most people who have will agree to me, startups are really agile. And I don't mean that in the buzzword way, but really, if you have been working in another company and then go to a startup, everything tends to be somewhere in between organized and chaotic, and sometimes it tends to be on the chaotic side, but it's always like everybody is so hands-on and really wants to get things done that the people handle all this extra work, because in a startup, I think everybody is really pushing to be their best, and I know that should apply to most people, everybody who's working, and in general. But in a startup, it just counts more, I think, because the entire company is based on every single person working there. So you can't afford to not give your best. And back then, at our start, we had 150 people and 40 developers on the go live. We had 0 API calls, obviously, because we just launched, and we had 0 monthly visitors on our website and application, because we also just went live. Back then, we were live in Germany, and in the first year, 2014, we made a GMV, gross merchandise volume, which basically just means the total value of all the products we shipped through our checkout had a value of 62 million euros. So that was our start. And then there was, at the end of 2015, there was this event called Crazy Christmas. And if you want to know more about, I think Jana and Rico, who are having the talk later today, will go a bit more into that. But basically, it was this crazy successful campaign where our marketing campaign had a bet with our CTO and CEO, and they said, okay, if you can pull it off, we will do 50% on every item in our shop. And they actually were able to do that, and yeah, our infrastructure provider wasn't able to scale, and we underestimated the amount of hits that we got on our APIs. So what we figured out afterwards was that people were sitting down on the 24th of December, loading up their baskets in our shop, and at 0 o'clock of the 25th, they were all hitting our checkout API. And that's just something that we didn't expect, and we had a lot of problems relating to that afterwards. But we also learned a lot of that. So afterwards, we had to figure out, so our systems somehow at some point got out of sync, and there was certain data in some service that wasn't transferred to the other, like they couldn't communicate because they just went down at some point, handling in all the traffic. And to handle that, we actually composed small self-sufficient teams from different departments of the company, which temporarily were able to specialize in one certain task and handle a certain problem that happened because of that. And that actually got us up and running, I think, in 1 month afterwards again, and we handled all those problems within 1 month, and could avoid most of the fallout of that. So at the turning point of 2015, 2016, we actually already scaled up to 300 people, and we're 90 developers. We had more than 35 million API calls per day on our APIs, and that's just external, not the internal communication between our services. And we had more than 1.1 million monthly visitors on all our applications. Oh, and also we went live in Swiss and Austria. And we more than tripled our GMV to 250 million. So you can see the scale of how the things are growing back then. That was within 1.5 years, or actually within 1 year. So Crazy Christmas 2015 was over, and 2016, someone said, hey, that worked out so well, let's do it again. But let's prepare for that. So 1 month in advance, our ops team sat down with our infrastructure provider, and they had to actually write emails to our infrastructure provider to ask them to please buy new servers and put them to the server racks for us to be able to spawn new VMs. Which, I'm not an ops person, but that doesn't sound ideal to me. We had some problems with that again. And then afterwards, even though we handled most of the problems coming from that, let's say we said, OK, this cannot happen again. We need to find a technical solution for this problem. And the good thing with that was that we wanted to move to AWS. And due to our Zoar approach, we were actually able to do this a lot faster than some other people might be that have this monolithic architecture in their application. But it was still not easy, still not as easy as just like taking all our services, put them in a VM, put them on AWS, and that's done. So we started off with the least complex of our services. That was, I think, mobile applications back then. And we started off specializing and focusing on that. And that actually took us like 2 months in the first, on the first service. And every other, then we went to the harder and harder services in our company. And actually, we migrated the last service within roughly 6 months. And the last service took us, I think, like 3 weeks. So you can see how this incremental complexity of getting more and more complex and handling that way and learning from the things that you've done previously really helped us migrating faster to AWS. Yes, and also what we did there was we had specialized teams. So the organizational part of that is that our head of operations and our CTO and our head of Agile, or LPD, as it's called in our company, sat together and said, OK, so we had this good experience with specialized teams in our past with Crazy Christmas, for example. Let's do that again and have a special ops team which just focuses on the migration. Sounds like a good idea, but then they said, but there might be a few problems with that. First off, you might have some certain knowledge which will only stay in that team, and the other operations people which needed to have handle an amazingly big backlog back then. And I think that actually got better by now. But ops are always short, and I think they are the bottleneck for a lot of tech companies, as it was here. So we said, OK, we can't afford just migrating to AWS. We need to still work on the backlog, which might not be as attractive for the ops people as it is handling this new technology, getting to know the new technology. And also, we wanted to avoid to have only a few people in the operations team that was able to handle the AWS migration or the AWS in general afterwards. So we said, OK, let's give them the ability to switch between the teams, and that way, work on different stuff and still be able to handle both the migration and the backlog in our operations team. And out of that idea, we developed a concept or an organizational structure called Move. So Move combined all of those experience we had over the last few years, and also was based partly on Brooks' Law. I don't know if you know that, but that basically is the concept of you ordering a pizza and the person on the other end tells you, oh, that's going to take 15 minutes. And then you ask them to put 3 chefs on the pizza because you're really, really hungry. And then the person on the other end says, yeah, we'll try that. And your pizza arrives 25 minutes later, and you ask them, hey, what the hell happened? I thought it only takes 20 minutes. And the other person says, yeah, but there were a lot of communication problems and no one knew what to do, and they were working on the same stuff, and some people were not doing stuff that had to be done. So that was also a basic thought that went into that bigger teams tend to also at some point cause more problems and have a lot of communicational overhead than they actually are able to produce more. So that brings us to the three pillars that Move is based on. So first, there's open structure, which, as I said, is this idea of having small, focused, and fast teams that have the opportunity to rapidly adapt to certain structural changes in our company. So for example, if you want to say, okay, we have this new service that we want to include, for example, Amazon Alexa, and we want to build an API that can access that, and we want to have a skill API that can generalize the requests that are coming in. And we could build a form from different departments in our company, everything that relates to that, into one small part in a small team that's just focusing on that. And afterwards, we can take the people back out and have them work back on their other projects. So the good thing with that is that there is actually a lot of advantages also for our developers. So you're able to work cross-team projects, which keeps you from getting to a point where you're just nauseous about always working on the same code base and not getting any new things to do. And there are fewer context switches if you can specialize in a certain kind of technology, because you might be able to work on a different task in another part of the company. And we can really frequently adapt our structure. So here's a small example. So those were two of our teams, the departments in the company, the team desktop and the unit BI CRM. And that's a really normal setup, I think. So there's a tech lead and a project lead. And after the transformation, we split them up into circles and units. So a unit is basically the more top-level structure of any department, and each unit has a tech lead and a project owner. And they do all the more top-level planning, and the tech lead, for example, does the architectural decisions together with the smaller circles. And each of the circles, as you can see here, you can specialize each of the circles in a certain service, for example. And each of those circles has also a project manager and a tech lead, which can then communicate with the unit leads and work on the problems faster. And so each of those circles can focus on really specific tasks, not bothering with all the bigger tasks that are also happening in the unit. So the next pillar is striving for excellence. So as I said, Move gives you the ability to shift between certain circles, for example, but it's also able to give you the opportunity to, for example, gain experience in leadership. So we want to push both ways that a developer can go. So usually, if you're working really long as a developer in a company, you might go at some point into management. And other people just don't have that. They don't want to work because they just, for me, I miss coding quite a lot, and I tend to do it now in my private time if I have any left. And so there's just some people that don't want to go that way of going into management, and we actually want to give those people also the ability to stay in their team, focus on a really and have their expertise in a certain technology, but also give them the ability to take a look at how it would be to be a team lead of a small circle. So you can really easily apply for a tech lead position in a circle, check out for a few months if that's something for you, have a smaller group of people under you, and if you don't want to stay in that way, if you want to stay in that position, you can, but it's also okay to go back down and say, no, it's nothing for me, I would rather develop. So that's one part, and then also you can work with a lot of diverse technologies. So it's totally okay to just go into another circle and say, hey, rather than leaving the company because I'm not interested in working with PHP in the backend anymore, I rather go into the front-end team and work with TypeScript, JavaScript, whatever you want in there. So that's also possible. And also you have this cross-team communication, which enables us to avoid the problem that sometimes there's a lot of blaming within the teams, where it's like, oh yeah, the desktop team fucked up something again, and yeah. So you can go into other teams and get a better picture of how they are working there. So here you can see like a normal structure, and then within the smaller team in the unit, you would actually be able to move from from a developer in this circle to say, okay, I want to be a tech lead in this circle if the position becomes available. And there's actually an internal, you can actually internally really easily apply to jobs that are able to be filled in our company, and just look across the company without having to leave the company if you want to do something new. So the last pillar is clarity is king. So we are honest in our communication. If there's a problem, it's okay to do mistakes, but if you're doing something, you have to be honest about that, and it's totally okay to do that. And to improve the transparency, to explain why you did it, and then we can work on handling that with a hands-on mentality. And how we are able to communicate our tech stack is we are having a transparent tech stack, meaning that throughout the company we try to focus on a few technologies. So we don't have like one team working in JavaScript, the other back-end team working in Python, then there's another team working in PHP, and then there's another team working in Go and Rust, and I don't know, every technology you can name. And there's actually, I think, companies that are doing that because every tech lead can decide, oh, I think that's a technology that fits my needs. So we are honest about the, and have a clarity about our tech stack, which enables these fast switches between the teams, because you don't have to learn a completely new programming language. And yeah, that enables us all the previous things to do. And also what we are doing is we tend to celebrate, over-celebrate maybe sometimes. So our shop system unit has this big gong, and every time we have a new deployment in our shop application, you can actually hear it throughout the company because they have this massive gong, just knock it. And then there's also just a lot of parties where you can communicate with the people of what went good, what went bad, and how it affected the team throughout the project. And I also said that you can gain insights into the features and roadmaps of other teams by celebrating that. So those three pillars are moved basically, and we are trying to push the advantages for our developers. There's easy team switches. I'm just going to recap here. Specializing in the technologies and gaining experience and leadership. And I think that's actually really great because that's what brought me here. Because I was a developer, and I think that there's no other company that I can think of where I, as a developer, with only 3 or 2 years experience in working in a bigger company, like I worked in smaller projects before, but like bigger companies not so much, where I could have had the opportunity to do what I'm doing right now. And I think that's a really cool idea. So, after the AWS migration, we arrived at a new point that we want to have in our journey. And back then, that was at the end of 2017 and the beginning of 2018, we had 530 people. And out of those 530, we had 140 developers. And Move really helped us with keeping our agile mindset and still have this adaptability in all our teams, even though we already grew to 140 developers in our company. We had more than 125 million API calls just on the externals again, on one day. And we had more than 4 million unique visitors on our platforms, going live in 2 other countries, Belgium and the Netherlands. And we were able to, again, double our GMV to 899 million euros. So that brings us to our last step in this journey, to today. So today, as I said, we have 650 people working at About You with 200 developers, and we're still able to keep this mindset of a startup based on Move. And we are now handling more than 300 million external API calls on our systems. and have more than 10 million unique visitors per month. Going live in 4 more countries in the past year, or past 1.5 years since 2018. So 2018, 2019, yeah, that's 1.5. Yeah, we went live in 4 more countries, and yeah, the last 2 just got added yesterday. No, the day before yesterday. So we just like 2 days ago went live in Hungary and the Czech Republic. And yeah, again, we were able to double our GMV to 1.8 billion euros, which is just crazy. If you talk to anybody about that, that's just like doubling your GMV every year. Yeah, just sounds nutty. So here we can recap again. You can see a growth in all our these facts that I told you about, which basically doubled every 1 year or 1.5 years. So you can see we scaled up quite a lot in the last 5 years, approaching our 5-year anniversary just now. And what do I want to tell you with that? So what I want you to take out of this talk is, don't think of company spirit, the organization of your company, the infrastructure and the architecture as separate concerns. They are one thing and they should be based on each other. So the company spirit should be the base, your organizational the organizational model should reflect your spirit, and the infrastructure and architecture should be based on how you work and not the other way around. Thank you. Are there any questions? On Wednesday there were. Yeah, there. You mean in the front end or back end? Where? Back end is PHP. There is some parts of the business intelligence which are working in Python because yeah, machine learning is really hard to do in PHP. At least that I know of. So yeah, we try to have this transparent tech stack that I talked about throughout the company, and we are using PHP mostly. So there's some server-side rendering which is done in JavaScript, and yeah, but mostly PHP. Any other questions? Okay, so first here, then there, and then front here.
Hi,
Yeah.
thanks for the talk. I got a question. So you started as a small company and grew quite fast. Was all this technological change driven by the developers, or was it more like in collaboration with management, which might not be as big in a small company? And also, if it's like a big company already and they're not in the tech age yet, do you think like the developers should try to drive it, or just switch companies and leave them to dry out?
So getting back to that idea of a transparent tech stack, I think there should be a lot of discussions, but at some point discussions really slow you down. So you can't have a really transparent tech stack. Like, believe me, I try to do a tech talk inside the company about which is the best programming language for the backend, and let's say not more than 50% agreed with the current state, but yeah, so I think that developers and everybody in the company should have a say, but in the end, if you want to have a transparent tech stack as ours, it's just not possible to make everyone happy with the perfect solution and the perfect programming language you want to work in. So yeah, that's what I would say. So it was decided based on the current state that we had, and yeah, the tech stack is not specialized for every person that is in the company. Yes?
You said that your move to AWS was informed by some problems with Black Friday or something. How do you cope with it today or last season? What changed, or do you do anything additional in order to survive those periods except just being in the cloud?
Yeah, of course. So moving to AWS is really just the first step. And as I said, I not an operations guy. I'm a developer, so there also has to be a lot of adaptation. You have to adapt your architecture, which we already had. So the service-oriented architecture, as I said, really helped. But you also have to adapt every service a lot. You have to do. We are really focusing on. We really focused on caching a lot, having everything that doesn't have to be computed twice. Being handled in a certain cache by every service in the company, so you could avoid every computation. So it's not just like going to AWS is not the magical solution for scaling. That's not the case, but it just helps if you don't have to write an email to spawn a new virtual machine, and actually being able to just handle peak loads at a certain point. So we still have to. We still have to, at some points, if we have really big marketing campaigns, so we're working together with one of the Germany's next top models, Lena Gerke, and like if she's pushing somewhere like like our page at some point, then we will have a warm-up phase before that actually happens, and actually spawn or scale up our infrastructure in advance, because there is a certain delay. So the load balancers, as far as I know, doesn't react in a millisecond, but there's actually like a certain delay, and we will scale up front to have like this inconvenience of like waiting 1 second for our website instead of waiting 0.1 seconds. There was one more question up front. I sleep a lot. I don't sleep a lot. No, so yeah, that's basically it. But I'm really enthusiastic about machine learning, and so I think if you love what you're doing, it's not that exhausting. But like the few weeks before the code talks, it really came short. So yeah. But I think that's the basic idea. If you love what you're doing, it's not considered exhausting, but you do need to sleep. Any other questions? Then I hope you enjoy the last two talks. Yes, 2 talks more. And enjoy the rest of the code talks. And any feedback you want to give, there is a rating. You can rate the talks you have been in on the website, so please do that. It helps me a lot by choosing the talks for the next code talks, and I think it helps the speakers a lot to know what they can improve on, and also just in general makes the code talks a better experience for everyone in the next year or the next half year when you come to in October to the code talks in Hamburg. Thank you.